Destiny 2 recently launched its 13th season since its release in 2017. Season 13 finds its story focusing on the arrival of a Cabal leader who we've never met, who is attempting to unite all of the stranded Cabal in our solar system under one banner to fight back the darkness. Initially, this leader attempts to make a pact with Guardians so that we can kind of work together, but the only issue is that she has a hard time discerning between ally and subject. Push comes to shove, and now we find ourselves attempting to stop the uniting of the Cabal forces through any means necessary. As with every season in Destiny, we see a refresh of the season pass with seasonal armor pool of new weapons, armor, and cosmetics. Season 13 also brings with it a new 3-player matchmade activity called Battlegrounds, a new zone for seasonal missions, stations called the Helm, new seasonal armor and weapons, new Trials of Osiris armor and weapons, and many more injections of things to chase in various parts of the game. Strikes, Gambit, and Crucible each got 2 new weapons to chase for in their respective playlists. Nightfall Strikes now have 3 rare weapons that were brought from Destiny 1 that have a better chance of dropping if you ratchet up the difficulty of that Nightfall. We also see the return of the Umbral Engram system from Season of Arrivals, where you basically get these engrams in the world that you can focus, so the loot that they drop is much more likely to drop what you want. Season 13 also sees the return of 2 Destiny 1 strikes located on the Cosmodrome, being called Devil's Lair and Fallen Saber. As the season progresses, we can expect new exotic quests, new battlegrounds, new seasonal events, and Iron Banner and all that usual stuff. So with all this new stuff in Destiny, a lot of people ask the question every season, every expansion, is it good to play? Is it worth booting my console back up again? I can at least give you a recount of my launch experience and talk about what landed really well, what landed okay, and what kind of fell on its face. And for those of you who just want to know, is this season better than last season, or compare it to something, the launch day impressions for this season, I would say yes, it is significantly better than the previous season, Season of the Hunt, and I would say it's even better than some previous seasons we had in the Year 3 era of Shadowkeep. Season 13, from a story perspective, introduces a new character, Empress Kytel. This pretty lady just so happens to be the daughter of Callus, whose robot we killed in the first Destiny raid, Leviathan. So Kytel brings her with her an armada of ships with the mission to unite all of the scattered Cabal in our solar system in an effort to drive the darkness out of the system for good. She had intentions of uniting the strength of Guardians and Cabal to wipe darkness away for good, but whenever she asks Zavala, leader of the Vanguard, to, quote, bow to her, the talk ends and they agree to see each other on the battlefield shortly. With hopes of peace gone, Kytel broadcasts a message to all of the Cabal forces stating that she is building her war council and only the strongest Cabal would make the cut. With this sudden vacuum of power in the system, Cabal are out and attempting to impress Kytel for a seat on her council. The Guardians understand that we need to stop this massing army of Cabal and cut Kytel from her forces if we hope to stop the rise of another Cabal leader. Saladin, Osiris, and Crow all seem to be working together alongside our Guardians to combat these new wannabe generals of the Cabal anywhere that they emerge. This season finally brings a properly match-made activity back into the game. Battlegrounds is, in essence, finding 3 Guardians to challenge a Cabal who believes themselves worthy enough to sit on Kytel's War Council. By the end of Season 13, there are supposed to be 4 Battlegrounds to play in. At launch, we have 2, one on Nessus and one on Europa. The way that these battlegrounds work is that 3 randomly match-made Guardians are dropped into the public space and challenged with waves of Cabal that do include champions while completing small challenges like smashing fuses or picking up unlock codes. Completing these challenges moves the group to a new area further away from the public space. This cycle repeats 2 to 3 times before finally we find ourselves face to face with the Cabal warlord who is attempting to impress Kytel. This ensues in a pretty chaotic but not overly difficult fight, and once the warlord hits the dust, you can receive some of the new seasonal weapons and armor themed around the Cabal. Impressions for this mode are positive. It is definitely a step in the right direction due to not taking place entirely in the public space and actually taking us to some of the lesser used areas of the world. The matchmaking is a definite plus, as well as the ability to launch the individual battlegrounds from orbit. It is also worth mentioning that once you've completed the starter quest for the season, there is a Battlegrounds playlist on the Vanguard page right next to Strikes that do offer powerful rewards with the addition of some modifiers to rank of the difficulty. Overall, this is the best seasonal mode we have seen introduced since the Menagerie, and its replay value has some merit with the chase for better weapons and armor that you can accomplish later in the season. The Battlegrounds event and the Season Pass do add some new weapons and armor. Cosmetically, the sets are whatever you think. I personally think it looks kind of silly with some of the helmets. However, the rest of the sets are alright. Collecting them, I still think should be a general goal for most players. If you collect them, then in Season 14, which is the very next season, you will be able to add and change the look of any of your armor to any previous set you've collected. So even if you don't think they look good at now, you may feel different later on when you can use them as much as you want on any armor set you feel the need to. Acquiring armors seems to be mostly focused on the Season Pass and through the use of the Umbral Engram system. I don't believe I've gotten any armor to drop from the Battlegrounds event, but there is something that I think will change the way that loot drops in the Battlegrounds event that we're talking about shortly. Seasonal weapons, on the contrary to armor, are very abundant in Battlegrounds activity as soon as you log in. As advertised, we have a submachine gun, sidearm, bow, and rocket launcher, all matching this rustic Cabal look. All of these weapons are available to be focused from the Umbral Engram system, and they are a guaranteed drop from the Battlegrounds event every time upon a successful boss kill. The only exception to this is the rocket launcher, which must first be unlocked in the seasonal challenges before it can drop, and the linear fusion rifle, which also needs to be unlocked in a special way on the Season Pass before you can find it dropping in the world as well. Another exciting thing about the weapons is the perks that can roll on them. Now, previously, Bungie has pulled out some pretty amazing perks in the history of Destiny, and I think this season possibly has the largest assortment of genuinely good perks that have them get introduced. Most of these newer perks you will first be introduced to when you start getting the Battleground weapons, but they don't seem to be the only ones that are getting these new perks Bungie has implemented. I'm seeing reports of the new weapons they've added to other parts of the game, not tied to the new season, getting some of these new perks that have been added. Impressions on the seasonal weapons are overall good. I don't see myself using the sidearm and bow that much, just because I'm not much of a weapon user in those two. I do think that it is a good idea to add them to the loot pool, as we don't have many bows in the game, and filling out loot vacancies is something Bungie will definitely need to get good at if they're going to start sunsetting our gear every year, so keeping all the loot pools full is a good idea. The new perks being utilized on the submachine gun and the rocket launcher, however, are a different story. New perks like Frenzy and Lasting Impressions make these two weapons contenders for endgame content. I've already seen reports of the new seasonal rocket launcher with the Lasting Impressions perk, one phase the newest raid boss, rockets, one phasing raid bosses. Yeah, something you should know. The Helm is a new landing zone in the tower where you have access to the War Table, which takes the role of a seasonal vendor where you can get new Battleground bounties, upgrade your Battleground loot tables, and unlock new seasonal mods. Also located in the Helm is the Umbral Decoder and Recaster, where you can take Umbral Engrams you've got in the world, focus them, and decode them into your desired loot. Also worth mentioning is a Postmaster and Vault terminal so that you can be used at your leisure. Overall, this space is pretty cool. It's neat to see them flesh out more parts of the tower and city in these ways. A few critiques worth mentioning. The Helm landing zone is located on the tower, but it is a separate zone. So if you need to decrypt a Prime Engram, you simply can't run to the Cryptarch. You have to relaunch the tower. I don't know if there's a way to conjoin the spaces together, as they probably don't actually exist in the same instance. I think a better solution would be to add ways of decrypting engrams and grabbing bounties in the Helm so you don't have to constantly swap between the two locations. The War Table brings with it upgrades that can be unlocked to increase the rewards received from the Battlegrounds event. Earlier I mentioned that armor doesn't seem to drop that much. Upgrades at the War Table add increased chances for drops of armor and weapons to allow even for multiple drops in one run of Battlegrounds. The only issue with this system of upgrading is that it isn't explained at all. Literally, the season introduction quest shows players how to start the activity, how to earn gear from it, and to use the Umbral system. Nothing is explained in regards to upgrading your War Table. Definitely some room for improvement to at least show players how to start the process of upgrading their Battlegrounds activity. Also worth mentioning is that the Umbral system, which seems to be tied to these new lenses that one must get before you can focus engrams to specific things, not much is explained there either, and Bungie leaves a lot of room for players to learn these things, when in all reality they're just going to look up a YouTube video of somebody who took the time to learn it. A little more room for improvement for explaining how the Umbral system works as well. Season 13 saw the addition of 3 new Trials weapons as well as 3 full sets of new armor. We see the addition of the hand cannon, sword, and pulse rifle. Each weapon has an adept version just like the other Trials weapons, and it would seem that all of last year's weapons have had their light caps raised, which would point to Bungie using the same weapons for Trials for at least another few seasons. The full sets of armor have been added, still retain that Trials theme, but add some small details to distinguish the classes. Hunters seem to have a snake theme, while Warlocks get sort of a bird-eagle theme, and Titans get what I assume are either alligators or crocodiles. I really do not know the difference. Now, the season of new loot to the Trials pool is exciting, but personally the only reason I see for playing is for the new armor sets, but then I discovered that the new 3 weapons can roll with some pretty stupid perk combinations. The Messenger Pulse Rifle, for example, can roll with Rapid Hit and, wait for it, Desperado. That's right, Desperado, the perk that improves your fire rate after a precision kill. We have not seen this perk on any other weapon in the game except Redrix, which was introduced way back in Warmind in 2018, but it's back, and I will get one. I will grind Trials of Osiris until my eyes bleed for a Messenger with Outlaw and Desperado. Overall, the loot will pull me into the playlist, which is how the game should be, but as to the other issues that face Trials and PvP in general, we'll see how long the playlist stays populated once people get these weapons and they don't really have another reason to go in there. One of the other bigger highlights, in my opinion, is the injection of new weapons to chase into each of the 3 core playlists in Destiny. When I say core playlist, I'm referring to the activities in the game that have a playlist dedicated for them, so you can boot up the game, load into these modes, and keep playing them on repeat: Strikes, Crucible, and Gambit. Previously, Bungie would only occasionally add loot to these modes. For example, in Beyond Light, Strikes got a Xeno class shotgun, Gambit got a grenade launcher, and the Crucible got a pulse rifle. These were not really advertised as new additions to the playlist and were kind of put in there as a little surprise to players who grinded these playlists, but you never heard much about them because the drop chance of them was really low. This season, however, Bungie acknowledged that loot was a little shortcoming in the last few seasons, and they wrote even a blog post on the situation. As a result to our feedback, they announced adding 2 new pieces of loot to each playlist each season going forward. This is a 6 new weapon injection, which is a big deal as they can only be received from these sources. The thought of doing the same strikes over and over again is much more bearable when you have in the back of your mind, maybe this time I will get that strike exclusive rocket launcher or pulse rifle. This feeling is mirrored through the other playlists. These weapons can roll with new perks the seasonal weapons received as well, which in my opinion makes them worth chasing. The only downside of this injection of new weapons into various parts of the game is the acquisition of them. It is completely random when they drop. There are no sorts of boons or things you can do to increase your chance of getting one. I've seen reports of some players going 30 plus strikes or Gambit games before even seeing one of these weapons drop. Now keep in mind, there are 3 different ones, including the ones that were released from last season. That means that even if you want one of these 3 weapons to drop, you have a 1 in 3 chance to get the one that you want if the weapon drops. On top of the really low drop chance for the weapon and having the chance of getting one of 3 different ones, Bungie has for some reason decided that these weapons have the largest pool of perks that can pull from a drop, with an astounding 12 perks in the 2 final columns. No other weapon in Destiny has this variety of perks. And what the heck does that mean? Well, let's say for instance that you want the Strike exclusive rocket launcher with the new perk Lasting Impressions. Well, you have a really low drop chance that I would say from my experience is just 1 in 5 of one of the weapons dropping, on top of the 1/3 chance of getting the weapon you want, and the 1 in 12 chance that the rocket launcher actually drops with this perk. You see my point. And keep in mind, this is just for one of these perks on one rocket launcher. If you are so specific and keen to get a weapon with every perk column, something you want, then you're going to be getting into the astronomical chances of getting the weapon to drop, getting the one you want, and getting some of 9,000 possible perk combinations. Yeah, good luck. And despite all of this, I still think that this would all be okay, except Bungie is doing this in a sunsetting Destiny. That means you have basically 12 months to acquire this weapon that you want and use it before that weapon can no longer be raised with its light level. You cannot have this degree of loot RNG while also placing a timer on how long that loot has to be good. It simply is not worth the amount of time you have to spend to get if it goes away and it's this hard to get. If Bungie had not brought along sunsetting, I could see some arguments that are okay for having this degree of randomness, Keep in mind that all the new weapons in these playlists have this degree of perk diversity and randomness to drop. I think that this issue needs to be addressed very, very soon, and either introduce a way to increase the specific loot drop rate with some sort of boon or consumable item, or introduce some way of target farming loot in these playlists. If they don't, the rush of new loot to chase in these playlists will quickly die out as players begin to realize that Bungie has tipped the scale so hard in the wrong direction that the odds of them getting that specific role on that specific weapon are simply out of their reach. I like low drop rates, I like the thought of grinding for the loot that I get, but when it is to this degree of randomness, it cannot coexist in a world where that loot has a timer on it with sunsetting. Major room for improvement here needs to be addressed very quickly. For those of you who played in Season of Arrivals, you're probably already familiar with the system of Umbral Engrams. Essentially, they are a different kind of engram that will drop in the world. You can return to the helm, use this focusing machine, and narrow down the type of loot that this engram can give you. You can get so specific that it has a 50-50 shot between two different weapons, or even the high stats that roll on armor. The Umbral system as a whole is a good idea, as it allows Bungie to still retain ways for players to get loot from previous seasons that they haven't played in, and expansions. This time around, in order to unlock the more specific focusing abilities, Bungie has introduced these lenses, which have to drop first from the Battlegrounds activity. Then you are given a challenge like give 700 kills with this weapon, and then you could use that lens as much as you want to focus your Umbrals. It's an easy system to understand, but it is not explained at all. The reintroduction of the Umbral decoder and focusing lens this season is making me think that the helm and the Umbrals are around to stay, as the UI that Bungie has designed allows them to keep adding to the Umbrals for Season 13 and Season 14 in its own little section. When Season 14 and Season 15 rolls around, they can very easily add a new box with new lenses and give players the ability to do both Season 13 and Season 14 focuses all at the same terminal. I think this is a good plan if it is indeed what is coming. Nightfalls have been gifted 3 return weapons from Destiny 1, the fan favorite hand cannon Palindrome, the heavy machine gun Swarm, and the auto rifle Shadow Price. These weapons are awarded at the end of a Nightfall, and the chance of dropping increases as the difficulty of the Nightfall does as well. Bungie claims the highest chance of these weapons to drop is in a Master Nightfall when the players have killed every champion, which earns them a platinum score. There is also an Adept version of these rewards that will drop at the end of a Grandmaster Nightfall, and they have their own shader and the ability to slot Adept mods, which can be dropped from Trials. Not sure if these mods can be dropped from Grandmasters. I don't believe Bungie has made any comment on Adept mods dropping from the Nightfall. Overall, the introduction of these weapons into the Nightfall definitely helps the playlist out. I think the chance of dropping going up with difficulty is an obvious yes please. The Grandmaster Nightfall was stated to only have a chance of dropping these Adepts, not a guarantee. I think that Bungie should change the chance to a guarantee, as in their original debut, Grandmaster Nightfalls were meant to be a one and done, not a grindable activity. Why Bungie would put a piece of loot into activity that only has a chance of dropping if they said in their own words that activity was never meant to be farmed? Please, Bungie, why? Returning strikes include the Devil's Lair and Saber from Destiny 1. The only playable strike as of writing this is the Devil's Lair, and is also the Nightfall for the week. I can say that after playing this strike, I like it a lot. I have the D1 music and themes still in my mind from that strike, and I think that going back and listening to these reintroduction of these old music, these old themes, these old bosses, it's definitely worth a play for every player. Saber not being in the playlist has been confirmed by Bungie to be a bug, and they are aiming for a quick fix to resolve that. Cosmodrome was also planned on being fleshed out much more to its full glory in Season 13 launched, but it is still in its small space locked down by boundaries and walls. Bungie did address this in a recent statement on Twitter and on their This Week at Bungie blog post, basically saying that some creative decisions and COVID restricted them from making the decision to expand the Cosmodrome, as Season 13 was probably in the works back when COVID was in its most severe form. So they've officially stated that Cosmodrome will be fleshed out at a later date. Final thoughts. Season 13 does some things for Destiny 2 that I think have been needed for a long time, but I don't think that many players just understand how great this season is for the game. The injection of new loot into the activities and playlist is something Bungie has not done that much, and I think they very much needed it as a breath of fresh air, and it definitely makes those parts of the game that they do constantly ask us to go back and play a little more enjoyable, because there's always a chance to get something good. The new weapons and armor in Trials, I hope, bring some activity to the playlist, and I know that for me personally, there are several weapons in there and armor sets that I am excited to play for. The new Nightfall and playlist weapons are unique, and they can roll with some pretty amazing perks, but they do need to be tuned so that there are many combinations and ways that we can get them. If they increase the drops or introduce new ways to target farm them, that will greatly increase the odds of keeping those playlists flowing with a constant influx of players chasing that god roll. Season 13 has highlighted a key point in Destiny, and even in looter shooter genres as a whole, you can take outdated or even mediocre activities, put some amazing loot into them, and those activities suddenly become a lot more engaging and worth running. Bungie has added multiple layers of reward structure into this season, so that even if you're grinding out the gold for the new Battlegrounds event and strikes, you have chances of getting the new strike weapons, and while you're working on these strike weapons, you're also getting umbrals to drop, and you're just getting a lot of different layers of different rewards on top of one another, and I think that is what this game needs more than anything. Overall, Season 13 has knocked my expectations out of the park, and it is really exciting to see them get this right in just a small seasonal update. The engagement will push Bungie to make these decisions more and more, and improving on them season after season. That wraps up my Season 13 impressions. If you have any opinions, any differing opinions, or you just want to talk about it, please leave a comment below. I'm more than happy to get a share of everybody's opinion, and I hope you all enjoy the new season of Destiny, and see you in the next video.